But about 75 years after that, Oregon declared its own independence. And were it not for the boldness and bravery of a few people, we would actually be out here celebrating today with French fries and gravy, and celebrating our independence with our national pastime of hockey. Not a whole lot of people know this, but Oregon came this close to being governed by Canada. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about how Oregon came to be a part of the United States. This wasn't a battle that was fought by soldiers. This was a battle that was fought by missionaries. And it was fought by farmers and trappers. And it was decided by one French Canadian who grabbed a buddy of his and crossed a line and changed the course of history. So at the Capitol in Salem, there are 3 statues on the East Lawn. Now, who knows what statues are on the East Lawn? Anybody? Okay, there are 3 of them. The first one is Dr. John McLaughlin. Does everybody know who he is? All right. There are 2 others. One of them was Jason Lee, and one of them was a circuit rider. So Jason Lee was a missionary, and he came from Canada. And he came to Oregon in the 1830s, and he came after distributing the Book of Heaven, or the Bible, to the Flathead Indians. Now, Oregon was not a friendly place at this point. This was the Wild West, so this was a pretty dangerous place for this guy. And it took bravery, and it took a lot of sacrifice to do what he did. He founded several missions in the Willamette Valley, and the purpose of the missions was to bring Christianity to the Indians. With the influx of the white settlers, the Indian mission that he founded across from what's now the state capitol became the school of the Oregon Institute, a school for the children of the settlers. Later, it became Willamette University, and it still sits there today. So an interesting piece of Oregon history, the statue of Jason Lee that sits at the Oregon Capitol is actually a duplicate. There are 2 of them. The other one is in Statuary Hall in the United States Capitol, and it represents all of Oregon. There's an inscription underneath Jason Lee's statue that says Oregon. Okay, so this was a missionary who represents Oregon to the entire world. The third statue was of a circuit rider. Now, who knows what a circuit rider was? All right, a couple of people. Circuit riders were Methodist ministers, and they traveled through the various geographic areas of the United States, and they had to go from church to church, from settlement to settlement, preaching the gospel, and also recruiting new people into the church and chartering new churches. So of the 3 statues that are on that East Lawn, 2 of those were ministers. I think that's really interesting, especially since we have such hysteria over the separation of church and state. But 2 of those were ministers, and they sit in quiet memorial to the biggest influences in Oregon's history. Another influence in Oregon's history, and my favorite out of all of the Oregon pioneers, was Mountain Man Joe Meek. Now, does anybody know who Mountain Man Joe Meek was? Well, you guys know your history. Everybody else needs to brush up. Okay, so one of the coolest things that I've got to do as a state representative was I got to take a tour of the Oregon Historical Society archives. Okay, and this is not the building on 6th and Broadway downtown that has a few little artifacts here and there. This is in a secret location. It's 100,000 square feet of Oregon history, and this is awesome. They have everything from actual covered wagons that look like they just rolled off an assembly line. These things have been restored to perfection. Amazing, not a bit of dirt on these things, and they came over the Oregon Trail and wound up being restored. They have the control center for Trojan nuclear plant there. Every little bit of Oregon history is documented in this 100,000 square feet. It's amazing, but my favorite piece, the coolest thing that I saw when I took this tour, I rounded this corner, and there was a guy in white gloves, and he was holding a rifle. And the rifle on the stock had an inscription that said, Joseph Meek. This was Joe Meek's rifle, and this was the coolest thing that I've seen at the Historical Society. Now, Joe Meek was a trapper, and he was from Virginia, and he came to Oregon in order to trap. He was a die-hard American, and he wanted Oregon to be a part of the United States of America. So, like any brave, die-hard Americans, he did what came natural to him. He said, let's vote. And so at what's now Shampooey Park, he actually drew a line in the sand, and he said, all for the divide, follow me. meaning everyone that wanted to be part of the United States of America, follow him to one side of this place. 49 people followed him, and the vote was 52 to 50 in favor of becoming part of Canada. Before the vote could be tallied officially, one French Canadian who didn't like British rule under Canada grabbed his buddy, who couldn't care less either way, and dragged him over the line, and Oregon decided to become part of the United States of America. If you can believe that, that's how it happened. So later on, Meek went on to become sheriff, and he went on to serve in the state legislature that I serve in right now. So independence is purchased with bravery and sacrifice. So is it sustained by bravery and sacrifice. Ronald Reagan once said that freedom is always one generation away from extinction. And we've had 6 or 7 generations of Oregonians who have fought for our independence and our freedom. From Joe Meek to the 113 Oregonians who have died in Iraq and Afghanistan protecting our freedoms. Yes, thank you. And one only needs to come to Estacada and see the Veterans Memorial that was built by volunteers, or see the flags waving on Broadway, to understand the appreciation that this community has for bravery. We are one nation, under God. And the 3 things I'd like to encourage you to do today to celebrate the 4th of July: thank God, thank a veteran, buy American. Thank you very much. God bless.